When someone with an avoidant attachment style loses the one person who genuinely cared, they don't break down in the way most people do. You won't see them posting emotional quotes or talking about heartbreak. You won't find them reaching out late at night, confessing how much they miss you. Instead, they go silent. They act fine, even relieved. But that calm surface hides a storm that only they can feel. Their pain is private, buried under layers of control, pride, and denial. Avoidants don't show pain immediately. They're masters at distraction, immersing themselves in work, social events, or hobbies just to feel in charge again. They tell themselves they're better off alone. But that's not peace, it's self-protection, because to acknowledge the loss would mean facing the truth they've spent years running from, that intimacy both terrifies and completes them. The one who cared for them wasn't a threat. They were a mirror reflecting what the avoidant has always feared, being seen, loved, and known. After losing that person, an avoidant will often rewrite the story in their head. They'll convince themselves the relationship was too much, that they needed space, or that their partner was too emotional. It's easier to shift the blame than admit that what they lost was safety disguised as chaos. But time has a way of stripping away illusions. Slowly, as distractions fade and loneliness creeps in, they start to feel the void. It's not loud or dramatic. It's subtle and suffocating. Nights feel longer, silence feels heavier, and the people around them can't fill the space that once belonged to you. They might scroll through old messages, not to rekindle anything, but to test if they still feel something. And when they do, it scares them, because feeling means vulnerability, and vulnerability is exactly what they tried to escape. So they pull back again, caught between the ache of loss and the fear of closeness. That's the tragic loop avoidants live in, the cycle of yearning for love but running from it. The truth is, avoidants do feel deeply, they just process pain differently. Their suffering hides behind indifference. Their silence screams the loudest. They may not cry or confess, but their pain shows in the way they become restless, in how they chase new distractions that never satisfy, in the way they look composed but feel disconnected from everything that once mattered. Losing someone who truly cared doesn't hit them all at once. It unfolds slowly, painfully, like realizing too late that the thing they ran from was the very thing their heart needed. And if you've been the one who cared for an avoidant, know this: your love did reach them. Even if they never said it, even if they left, you awakened something they didn't know they had. The capacity to be seen and loved without judgment. They may never tell you, but in their quietest moments, they'll remember you as the one who saw through their armor and still chose to stay. And that memory, that echo of genuine connection, will be their silent pain and their greatest teacher. Avoidants hide their pain beneath composure, crafting an image of control that shields them from vulnerability. When they lose someone who truly cared, their first instinct isn't to grieve openly, but to shut down emotionally. To outsiders, it looks like they've moved on with ease. They might appear calm, indifferent, even content, as if the relationship never touched them deeply, but that external stillness is deceptive. It's the armor they've worn their entire lives to avoid feeling unsafe, rejected, or dependent on someone else. Their silence isn't peace, it's a survival mechanism. Inside, they feel the sting of loss, but they've learned to disconnect from their emotions before they can even surface. For avoidance, showing pain feels like weakness. Vulnerability reminds them of times in the past when closeness led to disappointment or rejection. So instead of confronting sadness, they intellectualize it. They tell themselves that relationships are messy, that emotions cloud judgment, and that independence is freedom. It's easier to rationalize the loss than to face the emptiness left behind. Their mind becomes their shield, analyzing the breakup rather than feeling it. This detachment gives them temporary relief, but it also deepens their loneliness because it prevents real emotional healing. The composure they display after losing someone who cared isn't genuine calm, it's emotional suppression. They've spent so long distancing themselves from their own needs that when love is gone, they don't know how to process it. They may go about their daily routines, keeping busy to maintain the illusion of strength. They smile when needed, laugh at the right moments, and act unaffected when people ask how they're doing. But when they're alone, the silence echoes with the things they never said and the emotions they never allowed themselves to feel. Avoidants often underestimate the emotional bond they had until it's broken. Because they guard their hearts so tightly, they don't recognize how much someone's presence meant to them until that person is gone. Their composure becomes a mask to hide confusion and regret. They might look unbothered, but inside, there's an unspoken struggle, a tug of war between wanting to stay numb and needing to feel something real again. Their minds replay moments of care, affection, and understanding, but they push those memories away before they can soften their defenses. Even their avoidance of pain is a form of pain. The effort it takes to seem unaffected is exhausting. The act of appearing strong becomes their way of coping, yet it distances them from others and from themselves. Deep down, they crave connection, but they're terrified of what that connection requires: vulnerability, honesty, and the risk of being hurt again. So they stay guarded, convincing themselves that detachment equals safety. But the truth is, the more they suppress their emotions, the more the weight of loss builds quietly inside them. Their calm exterior might fool the world, but it doesn't fool their own heart. Beneath that polished surface lies a quiet ache, a longing for the person they lost, and a fear that they'll never be able to love or be loved that freely again. Distraction becomes the avoidant's most reliable form of emotional armor. When they lose someone who truly cared, they don't sit with their emotions, they run from them. They throw themselves into work, social obligations, fitness routines, or hobbies, not out of passion, but out of necessity. Every task becomes a form of escape, a way to outrun the feelings they don't know how to process. They convince themselves they're fine because their schedules are full and their minds are occupied, yet beneath that productivity lies a quiet desperation to avoid stillness, because stillness is where the pain hides. For the avoidant, being busy feels safe. Activity gives them a sense of control in moments where emotions threaten to overwhelm them. After losing someone who truly cared, their subconscious fear is that if they stop and feel, they'll lose that control they've spent years building, emotional walls, and distraction becomes the maintenance tool that keeps those walls intact. They don't realize that in trying to escape pain, they're actually deepening it. Every new project, every late night work session, and every impulsive plan serves as a temporary numbing agent. They aren't living, they're surviving. Avoidants are skilled at convincing themselves that distractions are progress. They might say they're focusing on themselves or working on their goals, but much of that energy is driven by avoidance rather than growth. They stay in motion to prevent emotional stillness from catching up with them. When friends ask if they're okay, they smile and say they're great, even proud of how well they're handling everything. What they don't say is that quiet moments feel unbearable, because in silence, the memories return. The sound of laughter, the comfort of care, the moments of intimacy they now miss but can't admit they needed. This pattern of distraction is deeply tied to fear. Avoidants equate emotional dependence with weakness. So when love ends, they feel exposed. Distraction becomes their shield against vulnerability, giving them a false sense of power. They tell themselves that they're moving on, but in reality, they're running in circles, unable to face the ache that lingers beneath the surface, the very things they use to escape. Overworking, socializing, or chasing fleeting pleasures become the evidence of their unresolved emotions. The more they distract themselves, the more disconnected they feel, not just from others, but from their own hearts. Eventually, distraction stops working. No matter how busy they stay, there comes a point when the noise fades and they're left with their thoughts. The person they lost starts to slip into their mind during quiet commutes, sleepless nights, or moments of solitude. They remember the warmth of being understood and the peace that came from genuine care. It's in these moments that they realize distraction can't fill the void. It can only delay the feeling of loss. The mask of busyness begins to crack, revealing the truth that they've tried so hard to avoid, that love mattered more than they ever allowed themselves to believe. And though they may not show it, their heart aches beneath the rhythm of their distractions, silently longing for the connection they once pushed away. When an avoidant loses someone who genuinely cared for them, their mind immediately goes into defense mode, rewriting the story to protect their ego from the pain of loss. It's not because they are malicious or manipulative. It's because admitting the truth that they pushed away something meaningful feels unbearable. They begin to tell themselves a version of events that makes the separation feel justified. They might say the relationship was too intense, that their partner was too emotional, too demanding, or simply not right for them. These narratives aren't always lies. They're shields designed to make the loss feel like a logical choice rather than an emotional wound. For avoidants, control is everything. Losing someone who cared exposes how little control they truly have over emotions or attachment. To regain a sense of balance, they rewrite the past to fit a story where they're the rational one who made the right decision. This self-preserving story allows them to avoid the uncomfortable reality that they might have sabotaged something beautiful. It's easier to believe they escaped dysfunction than to accept that fear of intimacy made them destroy the safety they secretly craved in their version of the story. They often downplay the depth of the connection. They might tell themselves it wasn't real love, that it was more about comfort or timing. They try to detach emotionally by reframing the relationship as something less significant than it truly was. This helps them suppress regret, but it also disconnects them from their own emotional truth, because deep down they know it was real. They know they were seen, cared for, and understood in ways they didn't think possible. But admitting that means acknowledging vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like failure to someone who has always equated emotional need with weakness. Rewriting the story also gives the avoidant permission to maintain emotional distance. If they convince themselves the relationship was never right, they don't have to face their longing or guilt. They can continue living behind their walls, telling themselves they were never meant for closeness. This cognitive trick allows them to avoid the grief process that most people naturally go through after loss. They replace mourning with rationalization, reflection with justification. But what they can't rewrite is how their body and heart remember the calm they felt in your presence, the comfort of being cared for, the warmth of being known. These sensations linger quietly beneath their rational explanations, creating a subtle tension between what they tell themselves and what they feel. Over time, cracks begin to form in the story. Little moments, songs, scents, or familiar places bring flashes of truth that challenge their rewritten narrative. The justifications start to feel hollow. They may begin to sense that their partner wasn't too much, but simply loved in a way they couldn't yet receive. They start to see that the relationship didn't fail because it was wrong, but because fear of closeness made them push it away. Yet even when they glimpse this truth, they often retreat back into denial, choosing the comfort of illusion over the vulnerability of regret. It's a quiet, ongoing battle between their heart, which knows the loss is real, and their mind, which refuses to admit it. When distractions fade and the noise around them settles, the avoidant finally begins to feel the quiet ache of what they've lost. It doesn't happen all at once. There's no dramatic breakdown or sudden realization. It's a slow, creeping awareness that slips in during ordinary moments. When they're driving alone, lying in bed at night, or scrolling through their phone with no one to message. At first, it feels like boredom, a vague sense of restlessness. But underneath that restlessness is grief, surfacing after being buried beneath layers of denial and control. The truth begins to reveal itself, not as a loud cry, but as a whisper that keeps returning. They miss the person who cared. Avoidants don't easily connect loss with emotion. They experience it as emptiness, a dull disconnection from life. The things that once felt satisfying no longer do. The hobbies they used to immerse themselves in start to lose their appeal. Work feels heavy instead of empowering. Social events become tiring rather than distracting. Slowly, the facade of being fine begins to crack, not because they want it to, but because emotional suppression has an expiration date. The pain they once avoided begins to surface in subtle ways, through irritability, anxiety, or an unshakable sense that something important is missing. As this awareness grows, so does the realization that what they lost wasn't pressure or intensity, it was genuine care. They start to remember the small things. The comfort of being understood without having to explain, the warmth of consistent support, the quiet reassurance of knowing someone was there no matter how guarded they were. These memories sting, not because they're dramatic, but because they're real. They reveal that the person they pushed away wasn't trying to control them, they were trying to love them, and that realization carries a weight that no distraction can lift. This stage of awareness is particularly painful for avoidants because it challenges their self-perception. They've spent years believing they don't need anyone, that independence equals strength. But when the loneliness becomes undeniable, it confronts them with a truth they've always resisted. Connection isn't weakness, it's human. Yet instead of facing that truth with compassion, they often respond with guilt and confusion. They replay the moments where they withdrew, the times they stayed silent when they should have opened up, the days they pretended not to care. They wonder if it's too late, if they've permanently closed the door to something that once felt safe and rare. Even though this pain grows gradually, it becomes harder to ignore. They might see the person they lost moving on, smiling again, or being loved by someone new. That's when the emotional numbness they relied on begins to break. The reality of their choices sets in. They didn't just lose a relationship, they lost a sense of belonging. They may never find the same way again. The awareness isn't just about missing someone, it's about realizing that the love they rejected was the one thing capable of healing them. But by the time they can admit that to themselves, the silence they once chose becomes the very thing that hurts the most. Even when they never admit it out loud, avoidants carry the memory of being loved truly and deeply like a quiet echo that follows them long after the relationship ends. It becomes their unspoken regret, a reminder of what they had but couldn't handle, what they wanted but didn't know how to receive. On the surface, they may seem content with their solitude. They might date casually, flirt with the idea of moving on, or claim they're happier alone. But deep down, something feels different now. The love they experienced changed them. Even if they can't fully understand or express how, it left a mark that doesn't fade. No matter how much time passes or how many distractions they chased, the person who truly cared showed them something rare: acceptance without judgment, affection without conditions, understanding without demand. It was the kind of love that didn't try to fix or control them, only to see them. And that kind of love is unforgettable, even to someone who once believed they didn't need it. After losing it, avoidants often find themselves haunted by moments that once felt ordinary. A certain laugh, a tone of voice, the way they were listened to without pressure. All of it returns in flashes when they least expect it. These memories come not to torment them, but to remind them of what they've tried to bury, that they were once loved in a way that touched the deepest part of them, the part they keep hidden from everyone else. Avoidants often process regret in silence. They don't reach out to apologize or seek closure because vulnerability still terrifies them. Instead, they live with quiet awareness, recognizing that the love they once resisted is the very love they now long for. But by the time they understand it, it's usually too late. The person who cared has already learned to stop chasing, to heal, and to move forward. This realization hits the avoidant slowly but powerfully. They start to understand that love isn't something that waits forever, and losing someone genuine means losing a piece of peace they didn't even know they had. Over time, this memory of love becomes their teacher. It softens them even if they don't admit it to anyone. They may begin to approach new relationships differently, hesitant but slightly more aware of their patterns. They start to notice how avoiding emotions only leads to deeper isolation, how silence feels heavier than vulnerability, and how love, when offered sincerely, deserves to be met, not feared. The regret they carry becomes a quiet motivator, pushing them to confront the parts of themselves that once sabotaged closeness. But even with growth, the memory of that one person lingers. It's not about obsession or nostalgia. It's about recognition. They know deep down that the one who truly cared saw them in ways no one else did. And even if they never say it, that memory becomes both their comfort and their curse. Comfort because it proves they were once deeply loved. Curse because they know they may never experience that same depth again. The love they lost becomes the silent pulse of their heart, reminding them not of what went wrong, but of what could have been if fear hadn't stood in the way. In the end, the story of the avoidant isn't about coldness. It's about fear, loss, and the quiet hope of redemption beneath all their distance. And silence lies a heart that once knew love but didn't know how to hold it. Losing someone who truly cared becomes their greatest pain and their deepest lesson, a reminder that love isn't something to escape from, but something to grow into. And for anyone who's ever loved an avoidant, know that your care was never wasted. It planted a seed of awareness that may bloom long after you're gone. Thank you for listening, for feeling, and for believing that even the most guarded hearts can still be reached with love.